news.
Hi, how are you? Welcome on in.
Podcast by George.
Another podcast by George.
Podcast by George. Border to border. Coast to coast. Podcast by George.
Well, there we are. Hello, hi, how are you? Welcome on in. It's a TGIF, folks. It's Friday, and I am happy because of that, and I'm also happy because we've got a returnee coming on the show here. I just love Laura Bellin with Bleeding Heartland. To get the download, to get what's happening in the Iowa legislature, this is a reputable source. This is one of the places you can go. Let me bring her live stream, live line graphic up on screen, and we'll introduce Bleeding Heartland is her site. It's bleedingheartland.com. We're going to be highlighting some stuff there. Go there, sign up. It's a community blog providing original reporting and commentary about Iowa politics, especially campaigns and elections, state government, social, and the environmental issues. Bleeding Heartland also covers what the Iowans in Congress are up to and any federal, state, or local policies of interest to Iowa readers. And Laura Bellin's been at the controls, the site's primary author and sole editor since early 2008. She's been recognized nationwide as an authority on Iowa politics, the legislature, the judiciary, and of course, the Kingfish, the governor's office, COVID Kim, some people call her. Kim Reynolds. We might be talking a little bit about the gov today, so stand by. We just have a limited time with Laura today, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on my What in the Hell segment, but I did want to start with this one story, and maybe towards the end here, if I get a chance, I'll throw some other things in here. But this is having to do with the train derailment issue out there in East Palestine or East Palestine, Ohio. Congressman Jamal Bowman, who is supposed to be a progressive in Congress, had reported that nearly 1 million pounds of vinyl chloride were on the train. Now the EPA has confirmed it's entered the Ohio River Basin, which is home to 25 million people. My God almighty. It's one of the deadliest environmental emergencies in decades, says Jamal, and no one is talking about it. Well, I am. I've been talking about it on the show. And what I wanted to do here today was bring this up on screen if my technology will cooperate here. Let's try this. This is from Twitter, and I will, caution people with stuff on Twitter. You don't a lot of times know what you're looking at. You don't know what the source is, but check this out. Let me bring this up on screen and see if I can get this to play here for folks, because I thought this was really something.
Wow.
Look at all that.
Look at it.
It's all in the bottom of the creek bed. Now look at it.
All right, so I'm hoping that you can see that, but my God, that's what oil looks like. That's what gasoline looks like when it goes into the water. They don't mix, folks, and these deadly chemicals are not mixing either. The person that took that video says it's in the creek bed, and when they threw that object in there, it stirred it up, and that's what you're getting. Okay, that is unbelievable. Okay. So that's how we're going to start. Let me make sure that that's off screen. Is it? Yeah, that's not on there any longer. All right, good. Struggle with the technology sometimes, folks. I apologize for that. Okay, so let me see. Having a little trouble here getting that not to be in my earphones. Let me click that off. Okay, that ought to fix it. All right. Good. I got rid of that. That was sticking around in my headphones. That's what's happening in East Palestine, Ohio. We talked about that on the show a couple of days ago with Ron Placone. But let me click a couple of buttons here and get Laura in, because like I said, her time is limited today. Good morning, Laura Bellin.
Good morning. Thanks for having me, George.
Yeah, well, thanks for being in here. And we're going to get going here, take a fast run through some of what I've been reading and seeing in Bleeding Heartland. And you've started a new series here as the legislature is underway. And I entitled this show Trouble in Threes, because of the unique situation, and I don't think it's a good situation that we have here in Iowa. I'm going to bring this up on screen, Laura. Something will become between us here to begin with. There it is. Okay, these are PBG fast facts. Iowa has a trifecta. Yeah. State government trifecta is a term to describe single party government when one political party holds the governorship and majorities in both chambers of the state legislature. Now, I know what a trifecta is from horse racing, but this next one I wasn't that aware of. Iowa has a triplex. A state government triplex is a term to describe when one political party holds the following three positions in a state government: governor, attorney general, and secretary of state. And the reason that I brought that up on screen, I want people to remember that because that's the situation as it exists in Iowa. So this legislature is underway. A lot of people are going, oh my God. Well, elections have consequences, folks. And
Oh,
if you
yeah.
like what's happening, this is what's responsible, right?
Yeah. I mean, Iowa hasn't had a Republican attorney general since 1978. So this is new. And Kim Reynolds was really adamant last year that she wanted her attorney general. She wanted my own attorney general. And she's got it now in Brenda Bird.
Yeah, and speaking of Brenda Bird, okay, that's a nice segue here to what we're going to get to off first here. This new series, which includes the bird here, but talk about the new series and maybe this first one, which outwardly you look at this, a lot of people don't understand the significance of it, but I know when I see this in Bleeding Heartland, it's important, and you better pay attention. The governor's plan would gut independence of the Iowa Consumer Advocate.
Okay, so the governor issued she introduced in January a plan to reorganize state government, and she presented it in her speech to the legislature as a way to rationalize, make government smaller, have fewer cabinet agencies. Iowa would go from having 36 different state government agencies to only 16 under her plan. That was the way she presented it. It's really not mostly about making government smaller. I mean, there will be some positions cut as different agencies are merged, but the biggest thing is that at many levels, this plan consolidates more power in the governor's office and more power in the attorney general's office. And of course, she wouldn't have proposed any of this relating to the attorney general. She would never have proposed when Iowa had a Democratic attorney general, Tom Miller. But now that Brenda Bird, a reliable Republican ally, is in that office, the attorney general would have more powers. And this is one of them I wanted to focus on because the Office of Consumer Advocate is not very well known. It's a fairly obscure agency, but it is important.
Okay, so yeah, bringing in personal here for me or anybody else. When would I ever need an Iowa consumer advocate? What's going to go missing here?
So if most Iowans get their electricity from one of the two major investor-owned utilities, Mid-American or Alliant Energy, they have monopolies and they are regulated by the Iowa Utilities Board. And you don't have a choice, right? If you live in their area, that's where you get your electricity. So the Office of Consumer Advocate was created to advocate for consumer interests in matters that come before the Iowa Utilities Board, mainly related to these big electric utilities, Mid-American and Alliant, although they also weigh in on some telecommunications and some other issues, but it's mostly related to regulating utilities. So for instance, in about 15 years ago, when there were proposals to build new coal-fired power plants in Waterloo and Marshalltown, the Office of Consumer Advocate came in with a little bit of a skeptical take. I wouldn't say that they went as far as the environmental organizations did, but with a skeptical take on like, hey, this doesn't seem to be the best use of ratepayer money to invest in a big new coal plant. So the Office of Consumer Advocate, most of its involvement, it's very technical on a lot of these filings with the Iowa Utilities Board. You almost have to be not just an attorney, but like a specialized attorney to understand a lot of their filings. But that's one of the issues with this reorganization is that the consumer advocate would no longer even need to be an attorney. And the attorney general, under the current law, the attorney general appoints the consumer advocate, but then once that person has been confirmed by the Senate, they have a lot of independence to operate over the next 4 years. Whereas under this proposal, the attorney general could fire the consumer advocate at any time, The attorney general would have control over all staffing decisions in the office, and the attorney general would basically be able to control what positions they take on issues. And most of these would be things that you and I would never hear about, but it could be very important. For instance, whether Mid-American retires coal plants sooner or later, how much money they spend on energy efficiency programs, all of those sorts of things. The Office of Consumer Advocate is supposed to be representing our interest, the electricity ratepayers.
I'll tell you where I would like to have an advocate is kind of a utility, water. I mean, as we've talked about a lot on this show, I mean, we're drinking a degraded version of pig manure basically in water across Iowa right now. Does this office have anything to do with water quality?
It doesn't, but a different area of what the governor is doing is going to be potentially dire consequences for water, which our water quality is already has so many terrible problems. But the governor has issued a moratorium on new administrative rules and a rethink of all existing administrative rules across all state government agencies. This is just going to be a bonanza for corporate lobbyists to go in, and if there's any rule that they don't like, that they haven't liked for a long time, now's their chance to make a case that this rule should be repealed. But the Iowa Department of Natural Resources, which doesn't do a great job protecting our water, but they do have some rules in place. All of those rules are going to be up for review, and anything that's found to be too burdensome
Yeah.
or for business could be
Yeah.
repealed or weakened. It can't be strengthened, right? The order says that the regulations can't, basically they can't become stronger. They can only stay the same or get weaker or be repealed. So that's a whole, it's very concerning. But the Office of Consumer Advocate, I mean, if you're active on the climate issues where there are many people trying to get, for instance, Mid-American to retire their coal plants sooner, this is something where the Office of Consumer Advocate has at least sometimes been an ally in some of these dockets with the Iowa Utilities Board. And the attorney generals, the Republican Attorney Generals Association gets a lot of its funding from corporate interest groups, including some utility groups, fossil fuels companies. So you can be sure that whoever Brenda Bird puts in charge of the Office of Consumer Advocate is not going to be pushing Mid-American very hard to get those coal plants offline.
Well, I've got up on screen now. This is the article as it looks on. And again, go to bleedingheartland.com and read this whole thing. Let me see here if there was anything else. We covered that.
This
Yeah.
is to be important related to the pipelines. I know you've talked
Yes,
about
we're going to talk about
dioxide pipelines because the Office of Consumer Advocate could have some role to play in some of that area. So the groups that are opposing the carbon pipelines, because the Iowa Utilities Board is the agency that is ultimately going to issue a permit or not, and it will make some decisions related to eminent domain or not for those carbon pipelines. So that this is another area of concern. Certainly, Brenda Bird has indicated that she's going to be with the big ag interest. She wants to create a whole special division within her department to represent basically the agriculture sector in litigation against the federal government. So it's pretty concerning.
And I've got up on screen again for people that are listening in audio, a quote that you have in the article from Emma Schmidt, the great Emma Schmidt, that's been on podcast by George a number of times. Yeah, she's a senior organizer with Food and Water Watch. Here's what she had to say about this bill, HSB 126. Remember that, folks, HSB 126. It guts the independence and effectiveness of the Office of Consumer Advocate, placing more power in the hands of the Attorney General and removing the requirement that the consumer advocate be an attorney. That Laura mentioned that. It also takes away civil service protections for the office's hardworking staff. That's interesting. The fact that Governor Reynolds' administration is seeking to politicize the office while the Iowa Utilities Board prepares to consider 3 proposed carbon pipelines is simply outrageous. And according to Emma, certainly not a coincidence.
Yes, when she talked about the workplace protections, right now the employees hired by the consumer advocate are what's called merit-based employees, which means they can only be fired for cause. So under this proposal, the attorney general would gain control over the staffing of the office, and those employees could be fired. They would basically be at-will employees. They could be fired at any time for any reason or for no reason.
Okay, good. Getting some comments already because people love. I'm not the only one that likes Laura Bellin. Brian Jack Holder says the Attorney General of Iowa isn't required to be an attorney nor even possess a law degree under current law. Isn't that weird? I mean, that's kind of why is that?
Well, I don't know, but I don't believe that Iowa's ever elected an attorney general who wasn't an attorney. But I guess the attorney general themselves, they don't prosecute a lot of the cases. They have the staff in the office who are handling the court things. So, I mean, I guess in theory, it's hard to imagine, though, that somebody would run for attorney general without being an attorney.
And here's a comment coming in from Rachel Filzer. Wow, consumer advocate doesn't sound consumer oriented. And the water, yes, it's a huge problem, undoubtedly. Okay, thanks for that, Rachel. All right, I got to roll on here because I want to get now. This series has been we've had this going for a while here. I've got the second installment of this. Brenda Bird quietly pursues an extreme anti-abortion agenda, and I looked at this and I thought, again, elections have consequences, folks. And I looked at this and I thought, okay, we're seeing the tip of the iceberg. So it begins, folks, and it's underway.
Yeah, and this one, it's true. Elections have consequences, right? That could be the subtitle of every show that you do, probably. But
Yeah.
Brenda Bird, she said during the campaign that she's pro-life and she's going to defend Iowa's abortion restrictions. And that was something that she announced right away. She was going to take over. The state was going to defend the governor's effort to reinstate the 2018 law that would ban 99% of all abortions. But what I was discussing in that article are different moves that she hasn't announced. Her office, they're happy to put out a press release when they sue the Biden administration over a gun safety regulation or a water regulation. And she's announced joining several multi-state lawsuits. And yet, when she's joined these multi-state efforts to seeking to restrict access to abortion or otherwise to do the bidding of the anti-abortion movement, she hasn't announced that. And why not? I still can't get any answers from her office on that. And the particular thing that inspired me to write that last week was that she joined a brief there's a Texas lawsuit that you may have heard of where, depending on it, they filed it in a specific part of Texas where they would get a specific Trump appointed judge who has been known to be very politically oriented and issue these sweeping rulings. And he could theoretically undo the FDA approval of mifepristone, which is the main
Yes.
the abortion drug. It's also used in miscarriage care, not only medication abortions, but this is something the FDA approved 23 years ago. And a federal judge could just say, no, that wasn't done properly. I mean, and so this is a big deal. This would disrupt abortion care and miscarriage care for many, many people across the country. And even for people living in blue states where they have in their state constitution that protects the right to an abortion, this is something that could theoretically threaten access to medication abortions in their state. So it's a pretty big deal. And she's been awfully quiet about it.
Well, and this is a real hairball. It's a snarl here when you start looking at this type of thing. I had this up on screen earlier. We're seeing the tip of the iceberg revealed here with what's coming. And it's coming, folks. Communication staff for Bird and Governor Kim Reynolds did not respond to Bleeding Heartland's inquiries about the legal moves. Now, this is a long-standing problem with you and the governor's offices and reporters and access to files and that type of thing. But this ain't going to get any better, most likely. This looks to me like it's going to get worse, and this is just another indication of it.
Well, the governor has a new communications staffer since the election, basically. And this person, I don't think he's responded to any question that I sent them about anything. So even for a statement that he's released to other members of the media. So it's increasingly difficult. I mean, I feel like every time the governor hires a new communications staffer, it gets more difficult for me to get answers to any questions. And sometimes you can submit a public records request, but not all of these things can easily be determined through a public records request. So sometimes you're just trying to get a simple yes or no. But in any case, the main point here is that Brenda Bird is looking to join other Republican attorneys general on all kinds of things. There was, prior to joint filing this brief in this Texas lawsuit, sent letters warning major pharmacy chains that they shouldn't be shipping this mifepristone drug through the mail. Also sent a letter to Yelp complaining that the notice that they put on crisis pregnancy centers is discriminatory. And so, I'll be looking for more. But some of these other Republican attorneys general announced these moves, and for some reason, Brenda Bird didn't. But she was happy to say yesterday that she sued the Biden administration over a water quality rule.
Yeah, and the outrage is starting to be heard, and it's going to continue. It kind of reminds me of the Trump presidency. You don't want to be. I mean, Bleeding Heartland's on fire right now over this, and is going to continue to be. But you probably wish things were quieter than they are. But this is an ongoing issue. Yeah.
Well, sure. And I mean, like I say, and a lot of people don't remember because they haven't been reading. But when I started writing at Bleeding Heartland, there was a Democratic trifecta, and I wrote some very tough things about the Culver administration. I mean, I'd be happy. Look, I wish there were more Democrats in office in Iowa for me to hold accountable, frankly. So that's, I mean, that's not the way things are right now. So, but I'm working on a piece related to the medical malpractice law that the governor just signed. And I mean, there were some Republicans who stood up and told the truth about that law and voted no. And I'm definitely going to give them credit for that.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. Also has to do with this pipeline situation we're going to talk about later. There
Oh,
are some
yes.
interesting bedfellows at times, and I have to keep from being too cynical, maybe. But let me get to this next story, because this is one that's near and dear to my heart. Iowa House votes to protect freedom of the speech from these anti-slap lawsuits. And for people that may not be aware, this is a big deal. The Iowa House members voted overwhelmingly, Laura writes, on February 9th to make it easier to counter lawsuits filed in order to chill speech. House File 177 would create a path for expedited dismissal of meritless claims stemming from exercise of the constitutionality or constitutionally protected right of freedom of speech of the press, the right to assemble or petition, the right of association on a matter of public concern. Such cases are sometimes called strategic lawsuits against public participation. So there's your acronym, and I don't even remember this. Strategic lawsuits against public participation. That is SLAP, because the plaintiff's goal may be primarily to discourage speech or media coverage rather than to prevail in court. The Republican floor manager, State Representative Stephen Holt, said passing an anti-SLAP law became a priority for him after the Carroll Times-Herald was sued over coverage of a local police officer who had relationships with teenage girls. Yeah, Holt noted that even though the libel lawsuit was not successful, the newspaper was left with over $100,000 in debt and nearly went out of business. Okay, and again, our time is limited with oral, but I want to play this because I was very honored, actually, to be on a panel at Iowa State University with Jared Strong. This is the reporter that
amazing reporter.
Yeah, that Laura is talking about, and he talked about this lawsuit. Now, this is only a minute, and I'm going to play this clip of the panel, and then Laura and I will come right back.
The one thing that I think we can improve upon, at least in the state of Iowa, Jeff and I were talking about before, was to pass a law that would allow newspapers or other media organizations to recoup attorney's fees so that there's not any sort of incentive to file a frivolous lawsuit. Anti-SLAP. There's been some talk about it at the state level, but nothing's happened yet. We prevailed in our lawsuit. It went on for 8 or 9 months. We were fortunate that we had insurance to cover a lot of that. But if we didn't, we didn't even make a trial, and our attorney's fees were in excess of $100,000. It would have easily doubled had it gone to trial.
Lawyers have to eat too, Jerry.
Thank goodness for the lawyers we had.
Okay, so that's Jared.
He
Now, he's
has
writing for Iowa.
amazing stories.
Is he
about
with Iowa Capital
sustainability
Dispatch now?
journalism.
Isn't he writing for Iowa? Yeah, okay.
Now
Yeah.
he's with Iowa Capital Dispatch.
Yeah.
But when was with the Carroll newspaper, he did some incredible accountability journalism with the police, and they didn't like it. I mean, it is. I mean, it's an issue. It's something that I've thought about because these lawsuits, these are not lawsuits that are legitimately about defamation where somebody could have a chance of winning. This is just to try to chill speech and make you afraid to say something or write about something. So it's important to me. The Institute for Free Speech, which is a national organization that is, they've supported my efforts to be credentialed in the Iowa legislature, but this is one of their priority areas, pushing states to pass these laws. And the president told me when I was working on that story that Iowa would go from worst to first. Basically, we would have one of the best laws in the country if if the bill that the Iowa House passed were enacted by the Senate. So far, it hasn't moved at all in the Iowa Senate. I'm keeping an eye on it.
Yeah. why doesn't it go anywhere? Do you have your suspicions or?
Well, it's interesting. In that post, I said I encourage
Yeah,
readers to get in touch with me
right.
if they had any idea who's the holdup in the Senate, because nobody is openly lobbying against the bill. So a couple of people independently indicated to me that State Senator Julian Garrett might be the impediment. I reached out to him and did not hear back, but those were people who I felt that are fairly knowledgeable about the issue. So it could be that Julian Garrett is the reason why this isn't passing. It's curious because there aren't any organizations registered with their lobbyists against the bill. So that always raises questions when something passes one chamber unanimously and nobody is publicly opposing it, and yet it doesn't move in the other chamber. It always raises questions.
Yeah, and Jared Strong, he's been on my show before. He was on here talking about forever chemicals. He's done some outstanding reporting on that.
Yes.
And when I listen to that, I mean, the fellow that's sitting next to him there that makes the joke, that's Jeffrey Hunt. He's a First Amendment attorney, one of the most highly regarded First Amendment attorneys in the country out of Denver. He's an Iowa State University graduate. And, I can't say enough about those guys. That was a great panel. You can go back into the archive of podcastbygeorge.com and check that out and check out the reporting on the forever chemicals. Jared Strong with Iowa Capital Dispatch, formerly with the Carroll Times. I'll tell you the other thing about that one. Those guys are funny. And they're very good on the air. It's kind of like Laura. I mean, I had this misconception about print journalists. I mean, they don't fit the mold. I mean, that Jared Strong is a funny guy,
Yes.
and he's a print journalist. Those guys don't have a sense of humor. Yeah, they do. Okay, let me get going here. I got to get to the next story. This is something that I had an email from a viewer. They knew you were coming on, Laura. They wanted you to talk about the situation with nursing homes. This is to give you an idea of what the issue is here, folks, out of Sioux City. KCAU reporting almost 24 nursing homes across Iowa have either closed or announced they will close since the start of 2022. And an organization representing Iowa's care providers is urging lawmakers to act. Leading Age Iowa released its first report on the current status of Iowa's aging services. The data outline showed an 11% decline in workers in the state's nursing home and care facilities. The staffing issue means that even if a facility can stay open, it has to reduce the residents it can accept. Quote, to make up for these staffing shortages, 83% of our members have had to rely on temporary agency staff. This drives up costs and puts a strain on the financial viability of our providers. Well, okay, I'm concerned about the financial viability of providers, I guess. I want to see these nursing homes, particularly in the rural areas, stay open, obviously. If they're cutting back, guess what that affects? Us.
Right,
and
right.
we're headed that way. We're all getting older. Iowa's a really old state, and there's a major reason that these nursing homes are closing, Laura, and it's right at the desk of Kim Reynolds and the Iowa legislature again.
Well, and this isn't an area where I have a lot of expertise, but from what I followed it a little bit over the years, and I think one of the biggest problems is the low Medicaid reimbursement rate. And
Yes.
this isn't the latest data, but I remember before the pandemic reading that I think about 2/3 of Iowa nursing home residents are on Medicaid. And so when Medicaid reimbursement rates are low, that is very difficult for the providers. And of course, we're a low wage state. We've been a low wage state. We haven't raised wages in many, many years. The minimum wage has been stuck at the same $7.25 since 2007. And so, I mean, it's not surprising to me that a lot of these centers are having problems. I mean, when I listened to the medical malpractice debate, the senator who was floor managing the bill, Jason Schultz, was making it sound like nursing homes will die if we don't pass this medical malpractice damage cap. Well, that's not the real threat. The medical malpractice lawsuits aren't the main reason nursing homes are having trouble right now in Iowa.
All right, good. And we're running out of time here. Laura's got to go very shortly.
I've got a few more minutes. So,
all right, let me bring this one up on screen because this is something we've talked about before. We mentioned it earlier. It's these carbon capture pipelines that I liken to a Rube Goldberg invention. There's a stamp of Rube, the great cartoonist from the early 20th century, folks. But it still kind of illustrates, the craziness of these things. And let me bring this article up. There's a bill targeting landowners' concerns on pipelines. This is out of the Register. It says companies building carbon capture pipelines would have to reach voluntary deals for 90% of the land on their route before they could seek to use eminent domain under new legislation proposed by House Republican leaders. The bill, which is sponsored by 22 Republicans, including House Speaker Pat Grassley, is the Iowa legislature's most serious effort to respond to the concerns of farmers and other landowners who fear they could be pressured to sell their property to 3 companies seeking to build pipelines across the state. Okay, so strange bedfellows. We've talked about this before. There's all kinds of environmental and safety concerns with these pipelines. People on the left really want to get these things stopped. People on the right are wanting to do it for this eminent domain issue, and it kind of makes me feel a little, I don't know. That's a me thing. You don't want your land taken, but if it wasn't for that, I wonder if they'd be lining up behind us. But the advocates will tell you it doesn't make any difference. Let's all
You
get together
gotta
on this thing
you
and pull on
gotta
the same
build
rope.
you have to
Yeah.
build your alliances where you can get them. The pork producers, which are big enemies of the Iowa environmental movement when it comes to water quality rules, they've been big allies with environmentalists on solar incentives for solar power. So, I'm all for working with people who will work with you. Pat Grassley he said late last year that in the 16 years he'd been in the legislature, he'd never heard from more constituents on any one issue besides these pipelines. The landowners, the sentiment in rural Iowa overwhelmingly is that people don't want these pipelines. And partly it's because when they built the Dakota Access Pipeline, this ended up having pretty significant impacts on people's yields and the soil quality and soil compaction and drainage on their land. And so the word gets around, right? I mean, this isn't, don't take it from me, environmental journalists, right? This is something that people are hearing from other farmers in their community. So that bill, I think it's very important. I think it could pass the House. Obviously, the fact that leadership are co-sponsoring it shows that they're serious. I don't think that there are other provisions in the bill. For instance, I think they wouldn't be able to start construction in Iowa unless they had gotten permitting approval in all of the states where they're trying to build the pipeline. That could be a big thing that delays the project. But one issue is that the House Republicans, they might put this in front of their members, and this would certainly, I think, pass the House because most Democrats would be for it, if not all, and a sizable number of Republicans would be. But in the Iowa Senate, 5 different bills have been introduced to restrict eminent domain as it relates to pipelines. And so far, none of them have even had a subcommittee hearing. So I see perhaps a little bit of kabuki theater shaping up here where the House gets a vote and they all get to say, they get to go back to their districts and say, we voted to protect your land from these companies that want to build pipelines, but then the bill dies in the Senate. So I don't know. I'm a little bit skeptical about that, but it's interesting to hear. There's no question Pat Grassley and other leaders in the legislature are feeling pressure from their constituents on this pipeline issue.
So your spidey sense is tingling, and in this instance, it's not a good thing. At least precedent would indicate that it isn't.
Well, you want to if it's a good bill, you want to get it passed through the House, certainly. So I don't think it's bad that it's been introduced, and I don't think it would be bad if it passes. That's a good thing. That could only increase pressure on the state Senate to do something. But for now, I don't see any sign that leadership in the Senate is prepared to let any of these pipeline bills go through. And certainly Governor Kim Reynolds has already tipped her hand that she's for these carbon capture boondoggle type projects. That she created a task force that had no input from anyone who had been working on climate change issues, and was entirely stacked with government officials and people from the agriculture sector and people, including some of them from the companies that want to build these pipelines.
And Laura makes an excellent point that we're going to let her go, but you got to try. You got to get these things introduced. You got to get the ball rolling. You got to start. I'm reminded of the suffragette movement. It didn't pass first time. There had to be numerous bills, legislation. It took a while, folks. This force the vote thing that I was such a proponent of earlier. You got to get Medicare for all on the floor. You got to get a vote. Yeah, it's going to get defeated. It's going to get beaten. But if you want to get anywhere with these things, you got to do it. You got to get going. This part of it, that part of it. I agree, man. I like that. Well, let me put this up on screen, Laura. This is bleedingheartline.com. I've had the Patreon address up there. And then and you're still on Capital Week. I'm still getting emails. And
yes, I'm on KHOI Community Radio in Ames, Capital Week. It's on KHOIFM.org. I have a Substack column that's Laura Bellin, Iowa Politics with Laura Bellin on Substack. And I also have PayPal, Venmo, I mean, personal checks. So people who don't want to sign up for a recurring contribution through Patreon, they can always contribute, just make a one-time contribution. But I'm really grateful for the editorial independence that I have, thanks to the broad base of reader supporters. So, and I appreciate your support as well, George.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm a part of it and happy too, because if we don't have this, folks, I mean, we're not going to have much. You're going to be relying on news releases from the governor's office. Let me talk about just, are you going to get more access under this new administration? My sense would be, again, my spidey sense would be no. That, I mean, you're going to have trouble. Any
I
idea?
mean, so far, I wouldn't say they've been very cooperative. The Iowa House has not assigned me a seat on press row where the other journalists sit. The Iowa Senate kicked all the journalists off the floor anyway. So
Yeah.
they have they have an area way upstairs with an obstructed view that journalists can sit at. So I am allowed to sit there for whatever that's worth. But no, I mean, I wouldn't say that I have more access, but I mean, I'm always chipping away. I'm filing public records requests and trying to find out what I can find out, and just keeping my eye on lots of news sources. That's how I found out about this effort that Brenda Bird joined last week. So tips are always welcome. I mean, I get a lot of good suggestions from readers on things I should keep an eye on. And the Iowa Legislative Committee meetings are open to the public, so I have no trouble getting into the room for those.
As I entitled this program, "Does Trouble Come in Threes?" talking about the trifecta and the triplex that we talked about earlier. And I thought about the governor's news conferences. We probably aren't going to see as many of those. Are they going to be virtual? Will you be able to attend those? Do you know?
She hasn't had a press conference since last July, George. She's never.
Wow.
I mean, in 2018, she cut off the
Wow.
press conferences a few months before the election, and then after the election started holding them somewhat regularly, every week or 2 or 3, but she literally has not had a press conference since last July. And
Wow.
so when she makes a big announcement, there are many, many things, believe me, with a voucher bill, with this government reorganization plan, with what she wants to do with administrative rules. I have a lot of questions. Other reporters have a lot of questions. She's given a very small number of sit-down interviews to individual journalists, but who even knows if she's ever going to hold another press conference. I've emailed her communication staff a number of times to say, what's the plan for press conferences? I haven't heard anything.
We got to raise hell about that. And I know Bleeding Heartland will. Laura Bellin from
Yes.
bleedingheartland.com. Thanks again for coming on the podcast by George Liveline.
Oh, thanks, George. Anytime.
Yeah, we'll get her back on again soon, hopefully when she has a little bit more time. Because as you see, man, I sprinted through that as hard as I could go. We did that as fast as we could. And there's a lot more we could talk about, but you can find it all on bleedingheartland.com. And if you want to, and again, this is live, but for people that are watching this on replay, thanks for following this. And if you'd like to get these video live lines, subscribe on Facebook and YouTube. That's where they appear. You can go to podcastbygeorge.com. Click on the little badge, the little icon there, and you'll be notified on YouTube if you ring the notification bell of when they release, and you won't miss them. You can ask questions as we go along and make comments, as some of our viewers did today. And then, of course, the audio versions record, and they're posted on places like iTunes, most notably. That's probably the biggest platform, but also Spotify, the iHeartRadio app, Deezer, places like that. But that's going to do it, folks. That's going to wrap it up. That's all there is. And there ain't no more. That's another podcast by George.